The playoffs are here, and you can predict the action all the way to the finals with FanDuel Predicts. Predict the spread, the total points, and even the game-winning moments that make the playoffs. Sign up and get a $25 bonus with FanDuel Predicts.
Offered by FanDuel Prediction Markets, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant. 18-plus bonus is non-withdrawable and expires 7 days after receipt. Trading derivatives involves significant risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Manage your activity with their consumer protection tools. Restrictions apply. See terms at FanDuel.com/predicts/bonus-offer-terms.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome to the Stone Zone. Well, there are occasions in American public life when symbolism speaks with even greater eloquence than even the most carefully crafted speech. Today, as President Donald Trump traveled to North Dakota to commemorate the anniversary of Theodore Roosevelt's legendary charge up San Juan Hill and participate in the dedication of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library, today was such a day. It was a tableau that seemed to collapse more than a century of American history into a single unforgettable moment. The sight was really magnificent. President Trump actually interacted with an AI-generated Theodore Roosevelt, asking him questions about his presidency, including whether the Panama Canal construction was among his greatest accomplishments. It was not merely a tribute to one of America's greatest presidents. It was a visual reminder that the virtues which built this republic are timeless: courage, independence, fortitude, patriotism, self-reliance, and an unshakable confidence in the greatness of the American experiment. Those are the qualities that embodied Theodore Roosevelt and his Rough Riders in 1898, and they remain the very qualities that President Trump has sought to rekindle throughout his own public life. History often communicates through symbols. Ancient civilizations certainly understood that truth. So did America's founders. A single image can encapsulate an entire philosophy more effectively than volumes of rhetoric or a prepared speech. It represents the passing of a torch from one generation of American leaders to another. It suggests that the spirit which carried Roosevelt up the slopes of San Juan Hill continues to ride beside leaders willing to place love of country above personal comfort. Theodore Roosevelt, of course, one of the most interesting presidents. He was the governor of New York, where he refused to let the Republican Party bosses partake in corruption at the New York City harbor. So the Republican Party bosses, called the stalwarts, decided the way to get rid of Roosevelt was to put him on the ticket for vice president with William McKinley. So one of the Republican bosses famously said, "Well, we're rid of that damn cowboy." Little did they know that McKinley would be assassinated and Theodore Roosevelt would go on to be one of our greatest presidents. Now, Roosevelt has occupied a singular place in American history because he refused to separate leadership from personal circumstance. As Assistant Secretary of the Navy, he abandoned a prestigious office in Washington to volunteer for military service. He organized the first United States Voluntary Cavalry, and he personally led his men into combat under withering enemy fire. Roosevelt believed that a leader earns the confidence of his countrymen not through eloquent promises, but through a visible act of courage. That conviction has always resonated deeply with the American people. The Rough Riders themselves became one of the most extraordinary military formations in our nation's history. They were not professional soldiers assembled through bureaucracy. They were all volunteers drawn from every corner of America. Cowboys from the western frontier stood shoulder to shoulder with Ivy League polo players and athletes. Ranchers marched beside Native Americans, miners, hunters, sheriffs, businessmen, and adventurers. They represented the best of an America that believed that character mattered more than pedigree and that patriotism erased social distinctions. The spirit remains one of the defining characteristics of the American Republic. The greatness of this nation has never rested upon government institutions alone. It has rested upon ordinary citizens who answer extraordinary calls. So President Trump's journey to the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library today carries significance well beyond the dedication of another presidential monument. Theodore Roosevelt transformed the rugged Badlands of North Dakota into part of the mythology of American leadership. He often declared that his years in the Dakota Territory shaped his character more profoundly than any other experience in his life. The harsh landscape stripped away any comfort and demanded absolute resilience. Roosevelt emerged stronger because the frontier required strength rather than excuses. That lesson seems especially relevant today. North Dakota, of course, represents an America that still values hard work over fashionable ideology, production over bureaucracy, faith over cynicism, and self-reliance over dependency. It is fitting that a president whose political movement has emphasized restoring American manufacturing, energy independence, secure borders, and national confidence would celebrate the legacy of Theodore Roosevelt in the very landscape that forged Roosevelt's own indomitable character. At the same time, it seemed to me that Theodore Roosevelt, who served in the New York State Assembly, who served as the New York State Assembly Minority Leader, who served as Governor of New York, and who served as the New York City Police Commissioner, should have his presidential library in New York. But I'm going to have to travel to North Dakota because I want to go to the Theodore Roosevelt Library, just as President Trump did today. In the meantime, we have an important development regarding yesterday's incomprehensible Supreme Court ruling that reaffirmed birthright citizenship. That is, ruling that babies born on U.S. soil to parents who are not U.S. citizens are automatically granted U.S. citizenship. I think this is a wrong-headed decision by the Supreme Court. So did the folks over at the Oversight Project. They released what they call a Keeping Families Together plan. It's an immigration enforcement strategy aimed at deporting illegal immigrant family units together. That would include pregnant illegal immigrant women and parents of children born on U.S. soil. The group argues that the court's decision does not grant amnesty to illegal immigrants simply because they have a child in America. Instead, it says that ICE should prioritize the removal of parents of so-called anchor babies and allow families to remain together in their home countries. The plan calls for ICE enforcement near hospitals, birth tourism centers, work sites, and communities with large illegal immigrant population. The goal, according to the group, is to shift away from the only targeting the worst of the worst criminal illegal aliens and return to the basic principle that all illegal entry should carry consequences without exception. The Oversight Project also proposes tax policy to discourage births by illegal immigrants and suspending visas for countries tied to birth tourism. Mike Howell, who's appeared here in the Stone Zone several times, president of the Oversight Project, said America is more than a pile of magic dirt and argued that citizenship should mean more than just crossing the border illegal and having a baby on American soil. This message may come off as harsh to some Americans who fail to see the demographic apocalypse that is looming. But if the illegal invasion continues, we will lose our nation and eventually our entire civilization. We frankly simply cannot allow that to happen. The Oversight Project's proposal to humanely deport pregnant illegal aliens is a wise and clever one, and I support it. Meanwhile, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is moving to finally close the book on Washington's COVID emergency era. RFK Jr., known as Bobby Kennedy, good friend of mine, is helping end the emergency declarations that gave special protections to manufacturers of COVID vaccinations, treatments, and medical devices after determining that the conditions used to justify those extraordinary powers simply no longer exist. Those declarations began in early 2020, and they allowed federal regulators to authorize COVID products under emergency standards rather than the normal approval process. They also, more importantly, granted broad immunity to drug makers and others involved in the administering of the products. The Biden administration extended those protections multiple times, most recently through 2024, when then Health Secretary Xavier Becerra, now the frontrunner in the race for mayor of Los Angeles, pushed them all the way through to the end of 2029. Even though the official COVID policy health emergency had ended in May of 2023. So RFK Jr. is now reversing course, saying emergency powers must be temporary, targeted, and accountable. In his words, Americans deserve a regulatory system rooted in the rule of law. The vaccine and drug declarations will end by June 29th of 2027, giving companies 12 months to transition products through their regular approval process. Emergency protections for medical devices, including COVID tests, will end sooner, as soon as December 26, 2026. The FDA says manufacturers have time to submit the necessary data for standard review. This, in my opinion, marks a long overdue step towards restoring constitutional government, ending permanent crisis rule, and reminding federal agencies that emergent authority is not a blank check to be used to profiteer billions. RFK Jr. is doing a tremendous job changing the rules back to restore health freedom in this country, but frankly, that's not enough. The individuals responsible for the COVID lockdown policies, namely the American Dr. Mengele, Anthony Fauci, should be charged with crimes against humanity and punished harshly for the heinous acts they perpetrated on the American people. And, in my opinion, until that happens, it will be inevitable that we experience a lockdown style of tyranny once again in our near future. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump's final financial disclosure shows how, as a businessman, he knows how to create value in the marketplace. According to the filing, Trump's business brought in at least $2.2 billion in 2025. A large share came from his investment in cryptocurrency ventures tied to the Trump family, including World Liberty Financial and Trump Coin. Critics are already trying to frame the numbers as controversy, claiming without any evidence that President Trump's crypto holdings are not on the level. These people don't seem to understand how the cryptocurrency revolution works and how it is ushering in a new era of digital finance. Crypto is no longer some fringe experiment. It's becoming a major engine of investment, entrepreneurship, and financial opportunity, and within a much more honest framework than the Federal Reserve's paper money Ponzi scheme. President Trump once questioned the industry in its early stages, but like any smart businessman, he's recognized where the market was headed and moved there decisively. He's now reaping the rewards of his foresight. The Trump family's crypto ventures reportedly generated $1.4 billion, while his real estate, golf, licensing, and media holdings also continue to produce major revenue. Mar-a-Lago and the Trump National Doral remain strong, plus Trump Media continues to represent a major part of his net worth. President Trump says he does not manage the money day to day, and he credits broader market strength caused in large by due to his America First economic agenda for helping to lift his personal fortunes. This is a president who was threatened with bankruptcy by the lawfare against him just a year and a half ago. Under President Donald Trump, America is once again rewarding builders, investors, risk takers, and innovators. From real estate to social media to cryptocurrency, President Trump is proving the future belongs to those who create and invest, not to bureaucrats who regulate prosperity into the dirt. Democrats sweeping the New York City and New York State primaries are not alone. When we come back, we'll talk about the fact that another far-left socialist has won in Colorado, proving that the end of the old moderate Democrat Party of JFK and Harry Truman is not limited to New York State, and that radical socialists are taking over the Democrat Party across the country. You're listening to the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. Don't go away, because we'll be right back.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
He likes politics and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone. Where's Roger?
The Stone Zone. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's a one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in the Stone Zone, proving that the socialist surge inside the Democrat Party is not just limited to New York State. It is clear the socialists just claimed the scalp of another long-term incumbent. 29-year-old Democrat socialist Milat Kiros defeated 15-term Democrat Congresswoman Diana DeGette in Colorado's 1st Congressional District primary on Tuesday, making yet another major victory for the far-left insurgency that is spreading well beyond New York across the rest of the country. This, of course, succeeds the election of a socialist Democrat in the recent primary for the mayor of the District of Columbia. In this case, Kiros is a first-time candidate, a Democrat Socialist of America member, and a self-described lawyer, PhD student, and barista. She defeated DeGette, who has held that seat since the mid-1990s, despite DeGette's own progressive credentials. But in today's Democrat Party, apparently, even being progressive is not enough. In this particular case, DeGette was pro-abortion, pro-Medicaid for all, and was an opponent to President Trump's border policies. But none of that matters. She was swept to ignominious defeat because she was not considered progressive enough. Kiros backed abolishing ICE, creating an intermediate pathway for every illegal immigrant, expanding transgender policies and paying for them with taxpayer dollars, codifying abortion into federal law, and using congressional votes as leverage against the Democrat leadership. She has also blamed capitalism for damaging the economy, democracy, and the climate. Can you imagine? Her past comments on 9/11 have also drawn criticism. Kiros described the attacks as inevitable, arguing that U.S. actions in the Middle East push people towards violence. Republican leaders say her victory proves the Democrat Party is being overtaken by Marxists and socialists, and the leftists will not accept anything but total fealty to their destructive goals. House Speaker Mike Johnson warned that many Mamdani candidates are emerging nationwide, while Majority Leader Steve Scalise said the Democrats have officially become the party of socialism. This is no longer the old Democrat Party, which was, still a fundamental believer in God, capitalism, a strong national defense, free enterprise, anti-communist in its nature. John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, ardent, hardline anti-communist, no longer would be home in today's Democrat Party. The radical left is dominating primaries, purging establishment liberals from the party fold, and dragging the party further towards open borders, anti-capitalism, and socialist control. The midterm elections may be the most important in our nation's history when faced with this existential threat to our freedoms, but to me, speaking as a Republican, I think this is a positive development. It fleshes out exactly who the Democrat Party is. It is no longer the party of John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, or Harry Truman. Now it is the party of Bernie Sanders, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Talita Rashid, and the rest. And that is a contest that I look forward to. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to Stone Zone. Don't go away because, well, I see Kamala Harris is sucking up to Mamdani herself ahead of 2028. That kind of shows you where the power in that party is headed. We'll be right back.
The Stone Zone. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's a one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. Well, failed 2024 presidential candidate Kamala Harris appears to be looking left as she weighs her political future. According to Axios, the former vice president recently spoke with New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani after a wave of wins by candidates aligned with the Democrat Socialists of America. Mamdani-backed candidates won multiple Democrat House primaries in New York, while the DSA candidate Malat Quiros defeated a longtime Democrat incumbent in Colorado, as I said moments ago. The socialist wing of the Democrat Party has emerged from the fringes into the mainstream of the party fold, and Harris is taking notice. The socialists are winning primaries, taking out establishment Democrats, and Harris undoubtedly would like to co-opt that sentiment to help boost her ambitions. Some who have even spoke openly about a Harris-Mamdani ticket may not recognize that Mamdani, having been born in Uganda, is not technically legal because the Constitution says one must be native-born to be president or vice president. Heading into the next presidential cycle, the socialist wing of the Democrat Party will have considerable sway. Harris has already struggled in 2024 to answer questions about Israel, Gaza, and the growing anti-Israel sentiment and anti-Semitism inside her own party. Now, with far-left activists making opposition to Israel a litmus test, Harris appears to be ready to pivot. It wouldn't be the first time. She once went from being a tough-on-crime attorney general to an advocate of defunding the police when she felt it would help her gain power. Harris has also reportedly met in Detroit with Abbas Alawet, co-founder of the Uncommitted movement, which criticized her last year for refusing to more forcefully condemn Israel. Alawet is now running for Michigan State Senate. This shows the Democrats are moving away from working families, public safety, and American strength, and towards socialism, as well as anti-Israel politics, and the false promises of government-run health care, child care, and housing. Kamala Harris may think courting the far left is smart politics, but it also exposes the radical direction of today's Democrat Party and how all Democrats are essentially being held hostage to this radical anti-American agenda. I've said it before and I say it again. If I were Chuck Schumer, I'd be very nervous because if AOC, or perhaps a lesser-known candidate supported by the Mamdani Combine, challenges him in the next upcoming U.S. Senate Democrat primary, well, I think Chuck is toast. You heard it here first in the Stone Zone. A group of House conservatives is bringing Washington business to a halt in a showdown over election integrity. 14 Republican lawmakers joined Democrats Tuesday to block a procedural rule that would have reopened legislative work on the House floor. Their demand is simple. The Senate must stop stalling and pass the Save America Act, President Trump's top election integrity priority. This is the bill that requires that one be a U.S. citizen in order to vote in an American election and that one have a photo ID. Why people find this to be controversial, I'm having a hard time understanding. Legislation obviously has passed in the House 3 times, but the Senate remains a roadblock where Republicans do have 50 votes, but they don't have the 60 votes needed to overcome a filibuster. The standoff is now delaying major legislation, including the National Defense Authorization Act, which includes, of course, the renewal of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which is so very important to the deep state. The other spending bills are also held up as lawmakers approach a July 4th recess. Reuters reported that the House adjourned early after hardline conservatives pushed to attach the voter ID measure to the defense bill. Speaker Mike Johnson says he's working to unite the conference and move the Republican agenda forward. But my good friend Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, one of the leading voices in the fight, says this is how Washington sausage gets made. Playing hardball will make it more likely for the important legislation to be passed. President Trump has similarly refused to sign any bipartisan housing legislation until the Save America Act is passed. The frustration is beginning to boil over. You can see that. Republicans campaign on secure borders and secure elections. Then they vote to sustain the status quo after they arrive in Washington, D.C. The voters are sick of it. That's why the strongest MAGA conservatives in the House are finally saying enough is enough. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump met Tuesday with my good friend, former Colorado elections clerk Tina Peters, following her release from the state prison early this year. Peters had become a martyr for election integrity patriots across the country who watched the vote steal take place in real time in 2020 and then saw those who fought back get punished. For the past 2 years, Free Tina has been a rallying cry across the MAGA grassroots as she rotted in prison for having the guts to investigate vote counting computers in her jurisdictions and keeping records of the fraud. That is precisely why she was charged and convicted on trumped-up crimes. President Trump said Peters came to the White House to thank him after he successfully lobbied Colorado Governor Jared Polis to commute her sentence, which, thank God, despite the fact that she was in poor health, he finally did. Peters had been sentenced in 2024 to nearly 9 years in prison after being convicted on several counts tied to her handling of the Mesa County election equipment. The case, as I say, centered on her decision to allow access to voting machines in 2021 amidst widespread concerns over election integrity and machine security. This was a textbook example of the two-tier justice system that protects the fraudsters while punishing those with the courage to push back. President Trump blasted the prosecution, saying that Peters was in prison because she exposed election problems, while the people responsible for election fraud were never held accountable. He also said she endured harsh conditions behind bars and should never have been treated like a violent criminal. President Trump again warned that voting machines, mail-in ballots, and weak election systems continue to remain a serious threat to public confidence in our elections. The Tina Peters case is more about than one county clerk. It's about standing for elected officials with the courage to do the right thing under duress. We must remember that Tina Peters is among the greatest patriots of our era and live up to her example as we fight back against deep state oppression and against and for right in this country to its limits. Meanwhile, Republicans have good reason to feel optimistic about holding the United States Senate. I completely disagree with my nemesis, Steve Bannon, who said the opposite only yesterday. But no one should mistake optimism for permission to coast. Right now, Republicans hold 53 Senate seats, while Democrats hold 47. That means Democrats would need to protect every seat they already have and flip 4 Republican seats to take control. Based on the latest New York Times Siena polling, that path looks increasingly difficult, if not impossible. In Texas, Republicans appear to have well positioned as Democrats struggle to find a candidate who can appeal to the state's increasingly conservative electorate. In Maine, Republican Senator Susan Collins has shown strength in a race Democrats once hoped would be an easy pickup. Their candidate, Graham Plattner, has been damaged by strange controversies, and Collins is now leading in recent pollings. In Ohio, Republican John Husted is ahead of Democrat Sherrod Brown in a special election for Vice President J.D. Vance's former seat. Ohio continues to trend red, and Republicans have a real opportunity to keep it that way. In Iowa, Republican Ashley Hinson is leading Democrat John Turek in another race that is far from a slam dunk, but certainly now leans Republican. In North Carolina, could be the toughest spot on the map, with Democrat Governor Roy Cooper currently leading Republican Michael Whatley. I have every confidence that Whatley will pull ahead in that race. Alaska also remains close, with Republican Dan Sullivan holding a narrow edge in polling. The bottom line is if the Republicans are favored to keep the Senate, but only if we exhaust all of their resources and leave everything on the field, so to speak, in order to make that happen. Conservatives and Republican supporters of the president must turn out, donate, volunteer, and fight like our country depends on it if they are going to win. I happen to believe that it does. If the radicalized Democrats win, President Trump will be impeached and maybe even thrown from office. We cannot put the great progress made by 2 years of MAGA in jeopardy. I think we must show up and get all of our friends and family to do so and vote for common sense. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance gives an interesting take on the birthright citizenship ruling. Vice President J.D. Vance said there may be one silver lining in the Supreme Court's decision rejecting President Trump's order to end birthright citizenship. The vote was very close. Speaking with Laura Ingraham on Fox News, Vance called the ruling a major mistake, but pointed out that it was effectively a 5-4 decision. That, he said, shows the legal foundation for automatic birthright citizenship is indeed hanging by a thread. Vance warned that the ruling could encourage foreign nationals to come to the United States, give birth while here temporarily, and then use that children's citizenship to access benefits and immigration advantages for the broader family. He called that interpretation of the 14th Amendment preposterous and said it makes a mockery of American citizenship. Well, the Vice President is right, but as American citizens, we must at least temporarily respect the court's decision until the law is changed. But they should not accept this decision as the final word. The Vice President noted that many legal experts expected a much wider defeat, perhaps 7-2 or 8-1, and argued that the narrow outcome shows that there is still a path forward. Vance said the administration must continue tightening border enforcement and make sure that the immigration system is not exploited by people using birth tourism or loopholes. The Vice President's right, we should not give up hope. You see, if the 2026 election comes out as I think it will, I think this law could be changed and that we could fix this legislatively. And given how close this was in the Supreme Court, perhaps that would be upheld by the court. The immigration fight is central to keeping America's freedom intact for generations to come. Citizenship must mean more than the location of birth. It should reflect allegiance, law, and membership in the American nation. And with only one vote on the Supreme Court separating the current system from reform, I don't think the fight over birthright citizenship is yet over. Meanwhile, growth in the manufacturing sector continues to show signs of strength as President Trump's America First economic reforms take shape. New June data from the S&P Global and Institute for Supply Management show American manufacturing expanding for the 6th straight month. Both major indexes remain solidly above the 50% mark, which signals growth, with the S&P's global manufacturing PMI at 53.9 and ISM manufacturing at 53.3. That matters because manufacturing is the backbone of a strong, independent economy. Under President Trump's America First approach, the focus is shifting back to production, supply chains, energy costs, and rebuilding the industrial base here at home. There's also encouraging news on inflation pressures. Prices paid for raw materials rose at a much slower pace in June, with ISM's price measure posting its largest one-month drop since July 2022. A major factor was easing energy pressure after the interim U.S.-Iran agreement helped push oil prices lower. The S&P's global Chris Williamson said that manufacturers reported a further marked improvement in output growth and order books. In other words, factories are still producing, orders are still coming in, and the sector remains in expansion mode. This overall picture is clear. Despite global instability and lingering price pressures, American manufacturing is still growing. There's no mystery as to why this is the case. It's because we have a president who's putting our people first for once and rejecting the globalist free trade status quo. President Trump's economic policies of less taxation and less regulation are the backbone of his agenda. By providing lower energy costs, stronger supply chains, and renewing our commitment to making things at home, that is how we make America great again and sustain the greatness beyond President Trump's second term in office. It is also why I am still bullish on Republican chances in the midterm elections, where the cost of gas is coming down, the cost of food is coming down, and I still believe the Republicans will gain strength in the House and the Senate. You heard it first in the Stone Zone. Speaking of Stone Zone, don't go away because we'll be right back with more hot American politics.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
He likes politics and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone. Where's Roger?
The Stone Zone. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's a one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone, where we break down the inside skinny on American politics 5 days a week. New whistleblower documents are raising serious questions about safety inside one of America's most sensitive government virus labs. The documents focus on the Rocky Mountain Laboratories in Hamilton, Montana, a National Institute of Health facility that handles some of the world's deadliest pathogens under biosafety level 4 conditions. The concerns come after NIH virologist Vincent Munster and a lab worker were indicted on felony charges after Munster was allegedly caught bringing deadly viruses back from Africa without proper paperwork. According to the FBI complaint, when questioned by law enforcement, Munster said, "I do this all the time." That's really troubling, to say the least. And Munster is apparently far from being an isolated actor in these activities. Internal documents suggest the problems go far beyond just one scientist or one researcher. A whistleblower says Montana's lab still does not have a real protocol for handling BSL-4 exposure emergencies. That concern became urgent after a worker was bitten by a monkey back in November while potentially exposed to the Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, a dangerous virus. NIH publicly described the response as smooth and professional, but internal documents and whistleblowers suggest it was improvised, and the situation could easily have devolved into a public health nightmare, kind of like COVID. The exposed worker was sent first to a hospital in Missoula, then transferred through Idaho to Spokane, requiring approval from 3 separate governors. The worker later returned to the lab to finish quarantine in a room the whistleblower says was not designed for long-term isolation. Documents also suggest that the Rocky Mountain Lab still lacks a dedicated isolation suite, a reliable testing arrangement, and proper security for certain field samples. It does not appear that the NIH is taking safety seriously after gain-of-function mad scientists caused the COVID pandemic. These lunatics who believe it is their mandate to play God are brimming with hubris. They must be stopped before their sinister machinations cause more death and destruction. This is a big story we will continue to follow. Meanwhile, Democrats have attempted to impeach my good friend Linda McMahon. House Democrats are now trying to impeach the Education Secretary, Linda McMahon from Connecticut, not for failing America's students, but for trying to reform the bureaucracy, which has failed them for decades. Democrat Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici of Oregon filed articles of impeachment against Linda McMahon, accusing her of illegally dismantling the Department of Education by transferring several offices and programs to other federal agencies. 16 Democrats have signed on to the vain effort. Bonamici argues that only Congress can dismantle the department and claims that McMahon's action undermined federal oversight and funding authority. But McMahon, who is a fighter, fired back, saying it speaks volumes that Democrats consider it an impeachable offense to improve student outcomes and reduce federal bureaucracy. Linda McMahon pointed to the department's record before she came in charge. The country has historically low test scores that were botched through the FAFSA rollout. COVID-area school closures caused an entire generation to experience unnecessary anguish, and parents were treated like threats. That was an ongoing fight over males and female locker rooms as well. She had quite the mess to clean up. I know Linda McMahon. She's one tough lady, and she's doing a great job. McMahon also noted that Washington has spent more than $3 trillion since the Department of Education was created in 1980, yet with only about one-third of our children today can read proficiently. The Department of Education has done the exact opposite of what it was promised, and like every bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., has only grown in power and stature throughout every pathetic failure. And therefore, I say to you, God bless Linda McMahon. I know that this effort to impeach her will fail. I'm Roger Stone. Thank you for joining us today in the Stone Zone. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Almonte's Key Food, proudly serving communities throughout Brooklyn, Queens, and Long Island for over 30 years. When you shop Key Food, you'll always find fresh products, great weekly specials, and exceptional personalized service. Visit at any of their Key Food stores at 8235 153rd Avenue, Lindenwood, New York, 935 Rosedale Road, Valley Stream, New York, and 6620 Avenue U, Brooklyn, New York.